A well-known and respected tech CEO, Dario Amodei, who heads a cutting-edge AI company called Anthropic, is raising alarms tonight about AI's potential impact on employment that could soon be felt.
Amazon reportedly putting 30,000 corporate jobs on the chopping block.
Was it a book party that I attended for you?
A book event.
6 years ago, talking about this on the horizon and the need for, maybe even back then, universal basic income.
This is just a classic example of the true incentives of companies, having less workers and more profits. So how come these companies have incentives to lay off so many workers in the first place? Is it because their company is failing? That gives me the incentive to talk about my favorite subject, incentives. So in short, an incentive is a certain action or a system that motivates or incentivizes people to do a certain action or behavior. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit more about the incentives of the system. So in the system, there are basically two categories of incentives. You have workers and people, and companies and CEOs. What the workers and companies want is determined by the rules of the system or the rules of the game. And you all know the game Monopoly, right? So by definition, in that game, if one wins, the others will lose. And in the current system, it's not really that different. There are definitely more winners. But how do we win the game of Monopoly? By creating a monopoly, buying up streets so full with expensive hotels and rents that everyone getting on these hotels and rents, you need to pay. And you need to pay a lot. And the more properties you have, the more money will flow to that one person. And the goal of Monopoly is to become the wealthiest player by buying, renting, selling property, ultimately driving all opponents into bankruptcy. And maybe you don't know this, but while the modern gameplay of Monopoly focuses on winning, the actual game's predecessor, the landlord game, was created in 1903 to demonstrate the negative aspects of land monopolies. And this, of course, also happens in our modern economic system, with the main goal of the system is to create and accumulate wealth. But the nuance, of course, is creating the wealth for who? And that's where the incentives of the companies kick in. I hate history just as much as you do, but we have to go a little bit back into the history to show what the original system was designed to. So the word economics originates from the Greek word oikonomia, or how the F you pronounce that. But it's a combination of two distinct words. Oikos, meaning house or household, and nomos, meaning law, custom, or management. So I guess it's basically household management. It's basically the same as your household, but then on a larger scale. Ancient Greek philosophy, particularly with Aristotle, the economy wasn't about infinite growth or accumulating of gold. It was more of a practical art. How do we manage our resources, food, tools, and time as efficiently as possible to make sure that the entire household can thrive? It was more of a practical art. How do we manage our resources, food, tools, and time as efficiently as possible so that the entire household can thrive? But somewhere along the way, we swapped oikonomia for crematistics, which is the art of making money for the sake of it. And then we stopped managing the household and started worshipping the horde. In some countries, this became the new religion. In other countries, the system had still a little bit of that ancient Greek spirit left, usually designed in a more social democracy way, where accumulating wealth isn't the only goal. Rules and laws should regulate how much wealth one can accumulate. And at a certain amount of wealth, that wealth becomes power. The power to influence politicians and even entire nations. And the classic saying is, do not work for your money, but let the money work for you. To accumulate wealth, it's essential to have workers that create leverage for your money. So for decades, workers were essential for the growth and wealth accumulation of companies. Then the Industrial Revolution started in 1760. People were telling us that technology was our biggest friend. Companies could earn more, workers could therefore even earn more, and eventually they could even work less. And eventually we will all live in Utopia. Everyone will be happy. That's at least the promise that the beneficiaries of the Industrial Revolution made to us. We all know how that turned out. And for decades, the circle keeps spinning. Companies paying higher wages, and people use those wages to buy what companies made. It's literally the basic source code of our economy. So what's the actual incentive of the system where these companies operate in? To answer that, I had to look at where the economy consists of, and I came to basically two groups. You have buyers and you have sellers. Or better said, people who buy things that companies make and companies that produce things that the customers want. And this is the cycle that keeps the system in check. And if there are enough companies that have workers, these workers will have enough money to keep spending it on those companies that produce goods and services. And so the system is feeding itself. And therefore, the core incentive of a company is simple: make a profit. Money flows to the top, just as in Monopoly. The core incentive for the people is surviving. We just want to have a house, we want to have food, be healthy, be happy, so we can actually enjoy the fairly small time in our universe on this earth. Back to the present moment. Just as the Industrial Revolution, it is happening again, but now with AI and in a much rapid way. Just hear the tech giants of AI try to sell you.
What's going to happen is robots will be able to do everything better than us.
If you have billions of humanoid robots, and I think there will be, I think everyone on Earth is going to have one and going to want one.
You know, people often talk about sort of eliminating poverty and that kind of thing, but really, how long have they been talking about that? There's lots of talk. There's lots of NGOs sort of trying to do these things, but really not succeeding. And you know, the evidence speaks for itself. But AI and humanoid robots will actually eliminate poverty. But there is only basically one way to make everyone wealthy, and that is AI and robotics.
Does that sound familiar? It is history repeating itself. With the coming of AI, it looks like it will be the first time that this cycle is on the brink of breaking. Companies and the economic system as a whole is producing more wealth than ever. But for the first time in history, companies don't need to share that. The incentive for the company is to make a profit, but for the first time with very little people, where most of the work is done by AI. And that will only get worse. Some people even say that AI itself created companies just for the sake of making money. But where do we as workers make money if AI is replacing most of us so we can buy and keep the economy going? Well, Musk has a little idea about that.
You know, sometimes in AI they talk about universal basic income. I think it's actually going to be universal high income, where anyone can have any goods or services that they want.
So he calls this system universal high income. This can exist because Musk believes in that in a few years, we will all own robots that will make money for us. There will be so much money, in fact, that there is an abundance of money we would not know how to spend it. And about how that money will be made and how will we get that money, Musk is a little bit fake about that, but there are basically two scenarios. So scenario one is where the government taxes the extreme productivity of AI and pays it out to the citizens of the country in a universal basic income. Scenario two is where the people will own the robots themselves who do the work for them. But, you know, here's the thing. Where's the evidence of that? that the government wants to tax productivity in the first place, especially in the UK and in the US? And where's the evidence that the companies making the robots are willing to give the most of its profit to the people that own the robots who do the work? Musk tries to keep selling this universal high income. There is, however, evidence that governments want to lower the taxes for companies and the rich. We can see that because the lobbyists that influence policy are the makers of AI in the first place. Meet Larry Ellison. Larry is the biggest donor in political history. In 2022, for example, he dropped over $30 million into a single PAC to back Senator Tim Scott, one of the largest individual donors in history. He's not just voting with that money, he's financing the gatekeepers of AI regulation. He also doesn't just build the cloud, he builds the systems that the government runs on with his company Oracle. He's a core advisor to Donald Trump, recently standing flanked by the president to announce Project Stargate, a $500 billion government plan for AI infrastructure. Larry builds the cloud and his political trends build the mandates to use them. And also for years, he tried to implement his AI system into the UK government healthcare system.
If you want to improve population health, you have to take all of your healthcare data, your diagnostic data, your electronic health records, your genomic data. And in the Middle East, in the UAE, for example, they're incredibly rich in data. They have a lot of population data. The NHS in the UK has an incredible amount of population data, but it's fragmented. It's not easily accessible by these AI models. We have to take all of this data we have in our country and move it into a single, if you will, unified data platform. So we provide context. When we want to ask a question, we've provided that AI model with all the data they need to understand our country. So that's the big step. That's kind of the missing link.
So he would have access to all the UK personal healthcare data. The same as how Musk tries to implement his Grok AI system into the Pentagon, letting Musk have access to data that doesn't belong to a citizen. So how will the people benefit from that? Larry wants our personal data. In Europe, for example, personal healthcare data is fragmented for a reason, because this data is personal. And of course, the only one who really benefits from this whole thing are the people in power, especially Larry. And because he has all this data, what do you think he will do with that data? Will he do good with it? Help us people out? Provide insights about our own body and health? Make sure that cities are affordable? What has he done so far for humanity? And also with his close tie to Trump and his involvement for the secret AI ballroom data center, that is also not scary at all. And yeah, make of that what you want. So while Musk is trying to sell us universal high income, Larry Ellison and his peers are lobbying for a world where AI-driven efficiency comes first.
Estimate, exactly what the impact would be, and there's always this question of adaptation, and these technology changes have happened before. But I think what is striking to me about this AI boom is that it's bigger and it's broader and it's moving faster than anything has before.
Their incentive? To ensure the laws protect the patent holders, not the people. That they become more wealthy and not you. And the more power they have, and the less power we have. Unfortunately, the evidence leads us not towards the utopia that Musk tries to sell us. The evidence is the same as what the system did for the past 20 to 30 years. Building more extreme and obscene wealth and influence for the 1%. So in 2006, there were roughly 700 billionaires around the world. 20 years later, in 2026, it's now 3,000. And not only the amount of billionaires rose, also their wealth. The wealthiest 1% grew with a staggering 60%, sucking up all the wealth that the system produces, or that we produce. But luckily, for the last 20 years, the lower and middle class also grew a lot. 2%. And even in the Netherlands, the top 10% own more than 50% of all the wealth. And all this extreme wealth is not only bad for the system and our wages, but also for democracy.
If you think about it, it is a little bit like a population of predators that are so successful in decimating the prey that they must feed on, that in the end they starve. Similarly, the economic sphere has been colonizing and cannibalizing the political sphere to such an extent that it is undermining itself, causing economic crisis.
If powerful people are more wealthy and powerful than nations, they don't need to follow the law or the rules of the working class. They can just invent their own rules. They can blackmail and buy powerful people, make the rules that they want, and build a system completely outside of our system. So, what's the incentive of the current system? Well, for what the evidence shows, the system incentives is to eat itself. The evidence also shows that it produces at least more billionaires and companies and practically wants to eliminate workers at all, I guess. And how will that better humanity exactly? So as a last note, AI is not the enemy, at least not per se. AI is just a tool, a very powerful tool for that matter, that can really enrich our lives, and I use it too. But if we want a world where AI efficiency leads to true freedom for us, instead of the surveillance that Larry wants, we don't just need better tech, nor do we need more AI for that matter. We need a completely different system. We need to regulate the shit out of AI so that companies from Musk and Larry cannot steal our data for whatever nefarious reason they have. We need to find ways of returning the wealth back to the people before these companies make us entirely obsolete in the current economy. And all that we want is a better system that is more fair so we can solve other more pressing social problems that AI definitely won't solve. And because it's also not that there are no other problems in the world that we need to solve, right? Thank you for watching my first essay video. For my future videos, I want to dive deeper into these kinds of subjects. I want to lay sort of a groundwork what an incentive is and then build on top of that with more examples of actuality so that the behavior of how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer makes a little bit more sense. For the past 5 years, I wanted to produce a big picture documentary about basic income, where I provide all the insights of experts around the world on the matter and exposes the incentives of the system. Unfortunately, we got out of funding, and now I try to make use of that footage on this channel because we have so much content and I really want to make use of that. So if you want me to make more of these videos, subscribe and I will see you in the next video.
So the question is not whether capitalism will survive the technological innovations it is spawning. The more interesting question is whether capitalism will be succeeded by something resembling a Matrix dystopia or something much closer to a Star Trek-like society where machines serve the humans and the humans expend their energies exploring the universe and indulging in long debates about the meaning of life in some ancient Athenian-like high-tech agora.